Hey everybody, how we doing? Welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How we doing today? We're going to get into our free agency forecast. We're going to talk about quite a few free agents today. Some of the plans that I think this team might have looking forward into this free agency. Again, free agency is very, very hard to, kind of predict, kind of forecast. The players got to put pen to paper. They got to be able to agree to it. Everybody wants to get a player at a deal. Free agency doesn't tend to be that until you're talking about, the intermediate, after like the top 20, 35 players, as far as, consensus rankings or things like that, players that are coming off of really, really high seasons. And I'm gonna start with one in that area because I think it's a position of real need. It's a player that I think really fits the type of need that this team has. It wouldn't be surprising to me if I think they're going to be in on some of the bigger names in free agency. We're going to get to those. I'm not going to start with the biggest names, just because I think this is one where the player fits. I think it's one where it fits the need. It fits everything that they're looking for at the position. I think it also gives the players that you've drafted and things like that an opportunity to continue to play on the field. You're not allocating top of the market value at the position to where it still allows for a player, if they come into camp and they're contributing and things like that, it allows that player to still play on the field. So we're going to get right into this with Cade Otton, man, the tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Everything you want from the tight end position. Big, physical, can play above the rim, is a excellent blocker, but it's not so much of I'm such good of a blocker where I catch two or three, I have 2 or 3 looks a game. This is a guy that can, he could put the team on his back, play the middle of the field, can play outside the hashes, things like that. Man, this guy is a big physical bruising tight end. This is the type of tight end that I want for Jaden Daniels. The age lines up, the skill set lines up. It's a player that I think if Tampa Bay was in a better cap situation, I think they would definitely retain this player. Since that maybe isn't going to be the case, putting the franchise tag on him because he's not a true, he's not the Travis Kelce's of the world, but he is a tight end that I think his best football is still ahead of him. He's a really good football player. He's got some explosive ability, some run after the catch. Everything that I look for from the tight end position, I think this is the type of guy that this team really needs to put in that position, man. When you have an impact player at the tight end position, which Cade Otton has shown he has the skill set and can elevate and be at that level. Him and Baker Mayfield have done really well together, man. That's why I've actually mocked Kenyon Sadiq to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is because of how good Cade Otton has been, how good Baker Mayfield has done with tight ends in his career. I think he's really refined his game and the nuances of elevating his game across the middle of the field, not just trying to beat you with his big arm, getting into the wide receivers, which they have had over there in Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield has really done a really good job, and I think Cade Otton has been a really good safety outlet for Baker Mayfield. This is the type of thing that you really want to see added to the Washington Commanders offense. I think in the new scheme, I think this guy is the perfect fit for the blocking responsibilities and assignments. He allows you to be able to, he'll be on the field and he doesn't really take away systematically like Isaiah Likely would, where he's more of a receiver, not so much the blocker. Isaiah Likely is going to get probably more top of the market for really a guess on what he can be more so than what he is. For what I know Cade Otton is, I would prefer this type of player. He's the type of player that I really want to put around Jaden Daniels moving forward. Give him like a 3-year contract, maybe, even a 4, 3, 2.5 years guarantee type thing. He's in the type of, like I said, he's in the age that you want. He's got the build, the makeup, and everything like that. I think he's a much better football player than maybe what he maybe grades out to be. Maybe he's not the name of Isaiah Likely. He's not the name of, Kyle Pitts. Those guys were drafted pretty highly in the draft. Cade Otton's one of them guys who was drafted a little bit later, has done his developing. He's excelled. He's improved year after year. He's the type of player that I really hope, if we're going, once free agency kicks off, man, sometimes I feel like the best values in free agency come day one. And it's not the players that are at the top of the market. It's the guys that teams identify as a perfect fit for them. Maybe they're not top of the market, but they prioritize signing them. And this is a guy that I would like to see the Commanders go after really, really early. I think he fits, like I said, everything that you want to do from the position, and I think that's a real feasible player for something. And then to the next player, which is Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd is he was a player that I really, really liked coming out in the draft. He was not a blue chip grade player for me when he came out in the draft, but he was somebody that when I looked at, I felt like he was one of them players that I was talking about, just like Arvell Reese. Had amazing tape at Utah, but it's a certain type of scheme that the player needs to be in. He's very, very good in coverage. He's very, very good at running sideline to sideline. He's an athletic, freak. With the makeup, the size, the height, weight, speed, he's everything you want from the linebacker position. He is going to cause. He is going to be more of that top of the market type deal. The linebacker position is a position that everybody saw what Sonny Styles ran, at the combine. Everybody is very, very hip to what Sonny Styles is as a prospect. I love Sonny Styles, and trust me, it took everything I had not to pick Sonny Styles in the mock that I just did from the post combine. I've mocked him to us before. Trust me, I do mocks daily just to kind of play with it, keep it going. Sonny Styles is a hell of a player, and if you can't get a Devin Lloyd or something like that, I think you're setting yourself up to be able to select a Sonny Styles. You have Jordan McGee, you have Frankie Louvu. Who knows how much longer you're going to have a Frankie Louvu on this team, but for me, it's value. This will be a value signing for me. Even for whatever the market is, top of the market for a linebacker does not equate to, edge rusher, defensive end player positions like that. Left tackle is a premier position. Devin Lloyd is one of them guys that at linebacker you're going to get. Top of the market value is going to be somewhere in like the mid to low 20s, and that's going to be higher towards the percentage of cap for, high-end linebackers, but it doesn't really equal to the top of the market deals that you're seeing with like Myles Garrett or the edge rushers that are, north of $30 million a year. So again, it gives you a premier player at what they would consider a devalued position, but when you have a top of the market linebacker, we see if you really, really want to have a good defense in the league, the really, really true good defenses in the league, they have the Fred Warners, over the history of football, the Luke Kuechly's, the Ray Lewis's. You don't have a great defense without a great linebacker. I think Jordan McGee is smart enough to handle the calls. I think Devin Lloyd can handle the calls. Really what Devin Lloyd brings you is the versatility of speed. You're adding more speed with Jordan McGee, who has speed, who has shown that he can play in the game. Can he stay healthy? Can he excel? You put a Devin Lloyd beside a Jordan McGee, and you have that speed sideline to sideline with both of those players, and you have Frankie Louvu kind of playing that hybrid role, the jack linebacker position and things like that. I think that's a good spot. Then you get into the draft, maybe Arvell Reese falls. You can put Arvell Reese at that jack linebacker spot when Frankie Louvu is, moving forward the next year, because if you draft Arvell Reese, ultimately you're probably keeping Frankie Louvu for 1 year, but after that you're gonna mix and match it his rookie year, but you're gonna let Frankie Louvu go after that. This is his last year under contract. There's no guaranteed money in it. I think Devin Lloyd gives you the flexibility about being able to go into the draft if Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain Jr., and David Bailey are gone, which I would almost expect them to be. Devin Lloyd gives you the freedom of, we could add a Sonny Styles, and and then you're not so much relying on Jordan McGee, or you have three really, really good linebackers in a Jordan McGee, Devin Lloyd, and a Sonny Styles, who can all kind of mix and match it and still do versatile pieces. So if you're in your base set, which might be 3-4 this year, you could still find a way to put all three of them guys on the field. As I said, you'll put Frankie Louvu at one, like the jack linebacker position, which would be outside linebacker in a 3-4. He'd be outside linebacker in a 4-3, same thing, but it's still considered the jack position. It's going to be a lot more blitzing, a lot more coming forward, exotic things like that, maybe covering a running back out of the backfield. He can still do those things, but, maybe drop into coverage and zone every now and again. But that's something that Arvell Reese specializes in. Getting Devin Lloyd to have those two interior guys set that can pursue the ball sideline to sideline, nothing gets past the line of scrimmage. you have some defensive tackles and you have some bigger guys up front. You re-sign Dietrich Wise and Tuttle. Guys that have shown that they can stop the run. They can play reps. They showed depth last year. Dietrich Wise looked really good before he got hurt. It was 2 games. Very, very active player, was very, very stout against the run, was not coming off his set, was holding the line of scrimmage very well. He might be an older player, but that doesn't really hinder you from what you're going to do. Cade Otton is in a certain age group. Devin Lloyd is in a certain age group. All these free agents that I'm going to give you, these are outside players that we're going to have to give term to if you're going to get these type of players. These are the type of players that are going to be identity pieces moving forward for you until you get to a certain point where the value just meets, until you can draft the spot behind them and work it like that. To the next guy, I'm bringing this up. I don't think we're going to necessarily be in the market for this player, but Alec Pierce, he's a guy that we got to talk about because he did not get franchise tagged by the Colts. He's a guy that said he wants to go out there and test the market. Do I think the Commanders are in the market for a wide receiver? Yes. Do I think they are in the market for a speed receiver? Yes. The averages and the things that Alec Pierce has put up, the numbers that he has put up, the impact that he puts up with the amount of volume that he gets touches in that offense, exceptional. That said, he's going to command a lot of money. Do I think the Commanders are going to go into that deep of a market at the position when you already have Terry McLaurin making the contract that he's making? I think it really locks you into the future a little bit more at the position that I think where they want to be when they're looking at this draft class, next draft class. The amount of wide receivers that come out in the draft, it's almost a position where, as we talk about devalued position, the devalue goes into... It's devalued. The position is simply devalued because when you look at the contracts that these players are making, the biggest value of having these players on a rookie deal is the fact that when they do get to their second contract, the wide receiver position, the edge market, the offensive tackle position, a top of the market deal for them is north of $30 million a year. So you're talking about something that's 10% of the cap hit just for one player at the position when you have multiple players that play that same position for your field. You start to lose depth when you start to have so many players at the top of the market. This team is under the certain window where Jaden Daniels is a rookie. You can put these type of contracts out. But like I said, going after an Alec Pierce, the 2027 class that's going to feature the Cam Colemans of the world, the Jeremiah Smiths, the Clemson wide receiver, and just all these guys, man. Like these there's some really talented wide receivers that are not only coming out next year in the 27 class, but really, really good wide receivers that are coming out in this class that can do a lot of the same things. Maybe it doesn't have the elite top end guy in this class like it does in the Jeremiah Smith class next year, but the value of picking a wide receiver and having them under that rookie contract, the guys like Carnell Tate or the Denzel Bostons. Denzel Boston gives you a really, really good deep presence over the field. Carnell Tate is an intermediate to, that top, outside the hashes. He's very good at that. So being in the market for an Alec Pierce, he's a guy that I wanted to talk about, but, more so just for simply the fact that I think we're going to be in the wide receiver market. I don't know how much term we're going to put into the wide receiver market. You already have Terry McLaurin. I think that's a position that you really, really want to you got to get the guy across from Terry McLaurin. It really is a need at this point. You saw when Terry McLaurin went down. Terry McLaurin has been a steady player for this team. He's just, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to be able to stay healthy for this team. You already start to see the reports of, will Terry McLaurin be here in 2027? Will this be his last year? Well, yeah. If there is a really, really good chance that if Terry McLaurin doesn't stay healthy this year, there is a really good chance that maybe you don't bring him back because you start to lose all the guaranteed money. This year there would be a $42 million cap hit. Next year they could save $16 million against the cap, sort of like what they did with Marshawn Lattimore. So we're going to get to this next player, which is a player that I really like. He comes from the Chargers, but Odafe Owe. He kind of took a little bit of time to really take off with the Ravens. He had a little bit of splash early in his career. Went to Jesse Minter with the Chargers. There is a chance where he could go back to the Baltimore Ravens because he fit what Jesse Minter did so well that there's a real shot that maybe Odafe Owe goes back to the Baltimore Ravens. I think Odafe Owe is going to be one of the players that is going to be top of the league, market, signing at the defensive end position. To me, he's a little bit more traditional 4-3 than 3-4, but he does have the athletic makeup that says, I could be scheme diverse. Is that the market that I think this team is going to want to get to? I think there would have to be a cap on it. If Odafe Owe is looking at about a $30 million a year term, I don't think you can go there. I mean, I know he has the age and all that to go with it. I just I don't know if you can necessarily go that route. That's a lot of money for a player that's realistically taken 4 years to really click. I think you'd really have to. I think you'd really have to have a lot of conviction to be able to sign an Odafe Owe to a $30 million a year type deal. Great player, like I said. I love the explosive ability. I love the tape. I love the measurables. I love everything that you're going to see from this player. The age lines up to what you're looking for. I just, like I said, depending on where the market goes for a player like this, I think that's going to be the determining factor ultimately to where you're going to get to with the edge position. It's definitely a position that I expect there to be I think there's going to be a high price paid to the edge position. What are they what number are they willing to go to? I think it's going to be different for each player. It's going to be how you grade and think about each player. But when you look at that dude come around the edge, man, he has everything you need. I think his best football is in front of him. He would be the ideal signing for me. But again, that's that's limiting to what the numbers are going to be. Pass rushers are very expensive. When you're paying for sacks, the numbers get high. It has taken him a little while to click to get the sacks, but he very much showed last year that he has the physical makeup and ability to get there and get home and get the sacks. I think he would excel in his defense. I think he would fit this defense. But again, you're gonna have to know. You're gonna have to have a number in your head, and the age is going to make that number higher because he's a very, very young, bright, physical, traded up, long, rangy pass rusher he's going to command a ton of money. Do I think we're going to be in that market? I don't know, but would it be surprising to me if we made that type of splash? No, we wouldn't, because I think this staff really understands that they have to get some premier level pass rush from this team. And I think going forward, this is going to be the type of player that you're going to have to supplement this roster with. So again, going forward, I think it's going to be what in the heck do we got going on here? I'm trying to switch over, and my button is not switching me over. There we go. I guess I got to do it physically now. Yep. But anyway, so back to that. We're gonna get to another player, which is right here. I was trying to switch it over. My bad. I'm not the best with the technology and things like that. But I'm trying to do clips and things like that. And of course, it's not letting me switch over either. So we're just going to talk about Jalen Phillips. Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher from the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Phillips is a very, very talented player. He had a ton of injuries and things like that when he was coming out of the University of Miami. This is a guy that I think at a certain point in the market, there's a number that you're not comfortable enough going over to, but when you look at the impact that he has, impact against the run, impact against the pressure that he puts on the quarterback even when he doesn't get home, he's a very, very, very talented player, man. There's a reason that even with all the injury concerns that he had coming out of college, he was still a very, very talented player and excelled, at the position and was worth taking in the first round. And, all the things that Miami has invested into him. Like I said, there's injuries and there's things like that. Trust me, any free agent that gets put on the market, there's a reason why these players become available. There's a reason why, teams aren't locking them up. Philly, there's a cap situation. The Chargers, with Odafe, I think Odafe wants to test his market. I think, like I said, his market's going to be super, super high. So for the Chargers to just go into negotiations with him and say, hey, yeah, we're going to give you $35 million a year. Well, I mean, that's north of what, Trey Hendrickson and guys like that are going to get. I would put Trey Hendrickson on this list. I wouldn't be upset if we signed him. But for Trey Hendrickson, to me, you're basically getting a 2-year rental at top of the market value. So you're probably going to sign this guy. You'll sign him for a 4-year contract, maybe like a 4-year, $100 million deal, $25 million AAV, but it's going to be $50 million guaranteed. So it's essentially a 2-year contract. And all these deals are structured like that. Odafe might get a 4-year contract, but he might have about 80 million guaranteed, to where it's realistically like you have a real commitment to this player for 3 years, because there's a lot of dead cap ramifications that if you get rid of him in the second and third year, you're paying for a player that you no longer even have on your roster. So for Odafe, you better be convicted. Jalen Phillips, I think you get yourself a little bit of bargaining chip with the injuries and things like that. I think there's got to be some kind of injury things that you're going to put into the contract because of the amount of injuries that he's had from his days in college, from his time in the NFL. I think there's got to be some things. Then we could talk about Nakobe Dean from the Philadelphia Eagles. Same thing. A player that was really, really, really good at Georgia, really, really talented, did a lot of great things in Georgia, got himself drafted in the second round, came to Philly, had a lot of injuries and things like that. Nakobe Dean is a guy that I think you're going to be in the market for, talking about Devin Lloyd and certain guys like that. I've talked many times on this show about Quay Walker. That's a guy that I really, really like. Is Quay Walker the more rounded player? I think Devin Lloyd is better in coverage and things like that. I think Quay Walker is a much better player going forward, but that speed sideline to sideline is elite. But you're going to have some of the lapses as far as dropping him into coverage and things like that. You're going to, he's going to give up a player or two from that position. But he does cover. He is a really, really talented player. So again, Quay Walker, Devin Lloyd, we all know the top names. And then, Reek Woolen is a guy that I've talked about, a ton on this pod. I think he's everything that you want from the cornerback position. Do I know where the money is going to get with him? Because there's been a lot of reports that the Tyreek Woolen market is all over the place. There's teams that value him, there's teams that don't, and he is a systematic cornerback. Every coach is going to love the size, but realistically, it's what scheme do you run? Is he going to fit into your scheme, and can you maximize the player? And then can you put him in the best position where he's not getting defensive pass interferences and penalties and things like that? Can you contain that kind of the high energy and the things that come around him? Boye Mafe is a guy that I really, really like. This is the edge position player that I would probably prefer. He's that steady Eddie guy. He's that guy that's going to somewhere be hovering around 10 sacks a year consistently. His pressure rate is good. I think he's the type of mental makeup that you want. He's a bigger body guy. He can play in the 3-4 or the 4-3. You can kind of move him around. It gives you a little bit more scheme versatility. The reason I continue to mention scheme versatility is Durante Jones is very, very big on the scheme versatility. That's where I wanted to go with for that. There's a big market out there. Which ones we're going to tap into is remaining to be seen. There is one player I really don't want for this team. I feel like for the production that you get for the money that he wants, Juwan Jennings is not a player for me. I know he has a history with AP. He's not that guy for me. He makes a lot more money than I think his value is worth. He blows up, has a couple really, really good games every year. That's not the type of player that this team needs. We need a consistent impact player. Juwan Jennings is not the market that I would be into. We could talk about Shaheed. There's guys like Cameron Curl out there who was drafted by Washington in the 7th round. Has been a really, really good, piece for the Rams. He was a really, really good piece here. And then the linemen, everybody's going to talk about, getting rid of of Tyler Biotish. Tyler Biotish did some really, really good things here. Everybody, of course, is going to instantly look towards Tyler Linderbaum because that is the highest end offensive center that's going to be available on the market. There's Connor McGovern. There's plenty of centers and guys like that on the market, but of course there's Tyler Linderbaum, and then you get to the Connor McGoverns and things like that. What is this team willing to allocate into the offensive line? Having Sam Cosmi under a bigger contract, knowing that Laramie Tunsil is going to get a top of the market left tackle contract, which is going to be a premier level. It's going to be a deal. It will open up some cap space because it's already counting towards $30-some million on your account right now. So you'll be able to lower those figures as you extend him, but you're pushing money towards the back end and things like that. You will get more cap space. We'll probably be around $100 million in cap space by the time we sign Laramie Tunsil, if we were to get that done before free agency starts. But again, the wide receiver market, it's way up in the air. I've kind of already accepted that Brandon Ayuk may be coming here, but of course, now that free agency is getting closer, you get the bash reports from the team that he's leaving, then you get the reports from outside for teams that are willing to, maybe take that gamble on the player. One says he's fully healthy, he's ready to go, he just didn't want to do it in San Francisco, and then the reports coming out of San Francisco are he never even did his rehab, he's got degenerated, osteoarthritis and all sorts of things going on with the knee. Usually the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it's that signing Brandon Ayuk is going to be a big risk. It's going to be a big risk signing. It's going to be a 1 year high risk, high reward, type of deal, with where it could have a very low, reward if the reports coming out from that side are, more honest than, the sides coming out from the Brandon Ayuk camp and things like that. I do think that, Adam Peters is a smart guy. I think he would really, really know how best to handle this situation. So if he's willing to go into that market, he was a part of drafting Brandon Ayuk. He might have even been the determining factor for drafting Brandon Ayuk out there. Trusting Jaden Daniels and his friendship knowledge and things like that. I think it's an asset to have, but it's not the reason you're going to make that signing, complete. So for me, it's Tyreek Woolen would be a priority free agent for me. Cade Otton is definitely a priority free agent for me. Those are more middle to higher end, not the complete premier high end. As I said, Boye Mafe is a guy that I really, really like. He's the edge that I would prioritize for this team. Would I understand them going the Joey Bosa kind of, patch it for a year rental route if you miss out on the Mafe, the Adoe, the Adafeoe, the Hendersons of the world, I could understand them maybe going after a Joey Bosa for like a 1 year rental. But again, that puts you in the same position that you've been in. I think this team needs to have a little bit more wherewithal to be ahead of if I need to spend another extra $1 million or $2 million over the course of 2 or 3 seasons, I'd prefer this team go that route. I'm not advocating for $5-10 million over market value to beat, to outbid the Tennessee Titans or the Los Angeles Raiders, who are going to continue to be who they are. Let them overpay if that's what they want to do. That's why bad teams stay bad, is because they overpay for certain players in a market trying to, get that splash signing, have that, winning the offseason type of feel. But, realistically, it doesn't always. If the player doesn't fit, it's not going to yield you the results on the field that you need to have. I do think the coaching staff has gotten better with the Raiders and things like that. I expect better performance from certain players in certain positions and just better coaching all around. There's a lot of things that go into free agency that, I think the smart teams do the best job. They do the best job because they identify a certain structure of contract that they're willing to put out for a certain player. And I haven't even really gotten into the running back position. There's the Rashad Whites, the Sun Devils, connection with Jaden Daniels. Both of Jaden Daniels hasn't said nothing publicly, but Rashad White at the end of the season was talking about how he would like to be a commander, would like to be added to that backfield. Dallas Goedert, the tight end for the Eagles, he's a little bit more in that Zach Ertz kind of, role where it's a rental position. It's more the Joey Bosa, at the edge, the player's over 30 years old, it's kind of a year-to-year rental kind of thing. Again, You're not going to be able to put. This team isn't going to go out and put 3 and 4 year contracts on every player that they sign. I'm giving you the names of the players that I really really like and the positions for that I think this team is going to go address with players that are going to have some actual term. What I'm telling you about with the players that I'm mentioning for 1 year rentals and things like that is you went into the market, you didn't get your OA or you didn't get your Mafe, maybe you got to get, the Joey Bosa of the world. Or, as I was just saying with Dallas Goedert, you went into the Cade Otton market, you went into the, Isaiah Likely market. Those markets got out of hand, financially. Let a bad team make a bad decision. You had to revert to Dallas Goedert. You have Zach Ertz that, I'm sure would come back, by the time he's, healed up and ready, come the off season. Again, I think the Jalen Phillips of the world, I think you're going to be in that market too. I think this team is going to be calling on a lot of edges. They're going to be calling on some cornerbacks. I think they're going to be very well into the center market, whether it's a Tyler Linderbaum, are they willing to go that route in the market as far as spending that type of figure? Or are they going to be more in the Connor McGovern type of thing where you bring in competition for Nick Allegretti, who you've re-signed and open up some cap space there and extended, have them 2 guys compete. Maybe you go into the draft, you're staring at Logan Jones available in the 3rd or 4th round, something like that. Maybe you make that pick, you let them guys battle it out. Demario Davis is one of the guys that's kind of like a fallback position at the linebacker position. Is maybe you don't get the Devin Lloyd or Devin Bushes of the world, guys that have shown that they're coming into their own. Took them a little bit of time on that second contract. That their market excelled. Maybe what you're more comfortable paying a guy that had to go to a second team and get the second deal on a 1 year prove it deal, and then they proved it. Maybe you're not as comfortable shelling out the money for that type of player. A Demario Davis from the New Orleans Saints could be a type of guy that you look at if that's the type of situation that you fall into in the linebacker market. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy like that. But his market, it's been reported to be pretty high. I wouldn't go very high for Wan'Dale Robinson. I've watched him play for the Giants. He's, again, very, very similar to Juwan Jennings. He has a couple good games, blows up every here and there, but injuries have been a thing. Is he a fallback option type? If you get into the Alec Pierce market, you get into, Brandon Ayuk, maybe you don't want to take that gamble. And then Rashid Shaheed, his numbers are getting, out of hand or whatever, something like that. Maybe you do go Wan'Dale Robinson. Maybe the market isn't as high for him. It takes him a little bit of time to sign. Maybe that's a piece that you do bring in. But again, that's more of the fallback, the second tier, third tier option. There's cornerback Mike Hilton. That's a guy that, I think, maybe you don't get the 27-year-old Tyreek Woolen. Maybe you're not really big on Woodard or the Kansas City Chiefs corner, or maybe you're not comfortable paying Jamel Dean from the Tampa Bay Bucks. Maybe you're not comfortable with the injury history and things like that. Dan Quinn definitely knows Dean from his time in Dallas and things like that. We'll see what the market is for that, and we'll see how comfortable this team is. I would expect them to pay some money at the cornerback position, getting rid of Marshawn Lattimore, everything that they were looking for to get from that player from that position. I think they're going to be pretty aggressive in that cornerback market. I think it's going to be one of the top 3 guys. I do think it's going to be Woolen. I think Woolen just fits everything stylistically, physically, and everything that they're looking for. Younger, faster, stronger, bigger. I've seen a lot of reports about the John Franklin Myers. I love the player. I love the effort that I see from this kid. Or not kid, but just, he's a really, really good football player. Everything that I've heard is there's already a team he's very much looking for, kind of already penciled in type of deal. And then, I've definitely talked on this episode, this show about safeties before. I was talking about Jaquan Brisker, a guy that is going to hit the market. I do think he's going to get, towards the top of the market in safety value. Do I think he's going to get the, Minka Fitzpatrick type deals, the Budda Baker type deal of the league? No, I don't think he's going to be in that type of market, but you're probably looking around the $12 million a year range, which is high for a safety. Would I make it? Would I make the deal? Would I make that type of deal with him? Yes, I would. It would allow me flexibility. Unless this team really, really loves Caleb Downs and they think there's a real shot that he's going to be there, maybe you don't go into the Jaquan Brisker market. Maybe you stay in like the Jalen Thompson range from the Arizona Cardinals, things like that. So again, and then Jalen Thompson also has some age flexibility where he's in his 26, 27-year-old season. I think that fits more of the profile of the type of players that this team needs to bring in, and you could bring that type of player in with some term. And then if Caleb Downs is available to you, then you figure it out after that. You could always move Jalen Thompson next year, or move him and give him do the respect by the player, and say, hey, we drafted you, we signed you. Caleb Downs fell to us. That wasn't our original intention. We didn't think he would be available. We took best player available. Maybe we'll move you. Things like that. And then Kobe Bryant gives you that same type of impact. I think he's going to be, a young player, a fast safety, a player that I really, really liked coming out of Cincinnati. It was a really good nickel corner. They moved him to the safety position. He played even better. He had a really, really good nickel season his first year. Then, his second season kind of struggled, went to the safety position. He's done very, very well next to Julian Love. We all know how the Seattle Seahawks back end was looking. I think Kobe Bryant's a player that's going to get more retained than more likely than not, in my opinion. But if Kobe Bryant was available, I would definitely be interested in seeing what the market is out there for him. Like I said, he was a player that I really liked coming out of college. He's a player that has excelled. He even made a position switch, and he excelled in that position. Safety is definitely a need for this team, and he plays the position the right way. He tackles and does all the things that you need. There's a ton of really, really good players that are in this market, man. So like, if you're asking me the ideal fits for this team, I've pretty much given them to you. Tyreek Woolen, K-Dot, and like I said, Boye Mafe would be the guy that I would prioritize the most over all of them. And again, I mean, like, some of these are top of the market deals for the free agency class. But if they're getting the type of deals that are top of the market to the position, then you just got to get out of that negotiation. None of these players are physically worth those type of deals. Laramie Tunsil was worth that type of deal. That's why you had to make a trade for him. Like I said, the players that become available in free agency, the bad teams are the teams that are paying these guys top of the market, to the Myles Garretts, the Jamar Chases of the world. They're giving them contracts in those ranges, and they're not those players. If they were those players, then players would have been re-signed a long time ago. Even the Alec Pierces of the world. Alec Pierce does not get the volume of Jamar Chase. He is a deep, carve you up over the top of the field like the Isaiah Likely's. A guy that's, I think his best season is about 675 yards. Can you give Isaiah Likely a contract that's in the top 5? I don't think so. So I think you can love the player all you want. Stylistically, he can fit. But bad teams do bad team things, and they drive the market up because they have cap space. They have to get to a floor. And it's why free agency is so hit or miss in the top end names that everybody wants to sign. Free agency starts, the tampering period goes on. As a fan, it gets frustrating because you're watching your team. They're not signing nobody, and you're watching all these players that you identified that would fit your team, and you want them. At the end of the day, your team wasn't willing to go to the top of the market value for a player that wasn't worthy of top of the market contracts. And then you're mad because, we are now here spending no money. This is why we always suck. But the truth is it takes GMs is their job on the line, is their livelihood on the line. And realistically, the easiest way to get fired is to get yourself married to bad contracts on players that are, fringe red yellows. And then they're making, fringe blue to red contracts. That's the easiest way to get fired as a GM. So again, I appreciate you guys sticking around, man. This is all I'm going to give you all for today for the free agency look ahead for this team. I just wanted to throw some names at you. Next week is going to be super, super busy. I'll keep getting the names to you, the re-signings as they come. This is the period where teams tend to lock up their players before they hit the market, whether it's mid, lower tier, whatever they are, depth pieces, things like that. Dietrich Wise is re-signed, as I said. Tuttle was a guy that we had brought over, was a free agent, kind of filled in for us as the injuries piled up on us towards the end of the year. Last year, we re-signed him. I think that's just a depth signing, maybe a guy that doesn't even make it through camp. But, it's good to see a guy that, came in here, gave some effort, and, was able to, kind of stick on the roster, get another shot at it. like I said, we'll continue to bring this news to you. Definitely Commanders-based podcast. I love to do the scouting and things, as I mentioned. So, again, if you guys stuck around for the pod, really liked it, comment. I'll be interactive with you guys if you want. Like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate anything. Anybody that watches, I appreciate you guys. Anybody that took time out of their day. I know how busy life gets and things like that. I just love talking football. This is what I do. So, again, man, thank you guys from the Blue Chip Podcast. Have a blessed day. Peace.